questions from you guys so that we can put them to the panelists and really get under the skin of what's going on with electric vehicles. But we mentioned a video, and there is a quite wonderful video that we've recently filmed with our good friends at EV Blocks. Are you ready?
I am.
You ready?
Ha! There he is! Get out! It's young Trevor! It's Trevor from EV Blocks, everybody! This is a new partner of ours. But Trev, we need to find out what you can do for us as a team. Have you got all the answers?
Well, some of them.
Yes!
Welcome, Trev, to the family. But what can you do for me and my fleets?
So Johnny, for you, we've got our AC products, which is universal foundation for EV chargers. They all look the same across multiple sites. You only have to dig up the ground once, and you can use them for both passive and active installations.
Welcome, Trev. Now, if I get one of these Polestar 3s, how can EV Blocks help me?
Well, Sarah, for you, we've got our EV Block Mini, which is the smallest product in our range. It's set up to work with the EV Tower, which takes a multitude of different EV chargers, and it will also accommodate the Simpson & Partner business line EV pedestal as well.
Welcome, Trev. How can you help me in the world of high-powered charging?
For you, Sam, we've got our B800, the largest EV block in our range, specifically designed for DC chargers.
So, I reckon that answers all the questions. I mean, domestic, fleet, DC operations, this is making a difference at every level. It's cost effective, it's efficient. I love the idea that you just all turn up to site, get the job done in one go, not having to come back when it's all dry and all of that kind of stuff. And that universality future-proofs these blocks forever, because we know technology changes up here, but you don't need to change the technology down there. Wonderful. Great job, EV Blocks. Trevor, welcome to the EV Cafe.
Do you know what? It's amazing what you do for us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, come on.
Whoa.
Well, I did get 3 claps down here at the front. Well done, Manjot. Thank you very much. Thank you for indulging us with that. We love to partner with people in the industry, and that is why we formed, really, was to celebrate new businesses growing and celebrating them into the business-to-business sector mainly, so that people could understand what was there to help with the electric vehicle ecosystem, the things that solve the problems that we're on the journey of doing. But someone else that is well known to us all and who's going to join us on the couch today is Dan Caesar. Welcome, Dan Caesar, please. Give him a round of applause. Make him feel welcome in the EV Cafe, Dan.
This is very comfortable, isn't it?
I know. It's
nicer than the big stage. And you're all much better looking here as well, of course. Apologies if you were just in the big stage.
I can see why you were the leader of this here pack in many ways, but you're doing a lot of stuff with Electric Vehicles UK. Tell us a little bit about that mission at the moment.
Well, I mean, it's been actually quite frustrating, the UK at points over recent years. We spend a lot of time I was in Norway last week. See, the EV uptake there is just extraordinary. We've just come back from Australia, much lower percentage EVs sold there, but the enthusiasm there was huge. I do feel like the UK market's been messed around a little bit from a policy perspective. I do feel that we all benefit from consistency. Investment case is really, really important to anyone in this industry. And I think that, if you go back to 2022, we had the plug-in charger grant went, the plug-in car grant went. There was some little moments with the economy that didn't really help disposable income in general terms. There was obviously the rowing back from 2030 to 2035. So I think it has been a pretty flat couple of years in the UK. Thankfully, the last 9 months, actually, EV sales have been pretty good. I'm talking about passenger EVs rather than vans. But that's been pretty good. 1 in 4, 1 in 5 cars sold during that period. But it does seem to me frustrating. I think we should be going faster. We're patting ourselves on the back because in 2024, UK was actually, for passenger car sales, was bigger by volume than even Germany, which is great. But I think if we get everything aligned and actually there's some more positive policy signals, we'd be in a much better place. So we formed Electric Vehicles UK in response to that. We felt that everyone was working their socks off to try and make it happen, but we're all doing it in quite a siloed way. We formed that not to duplicate efforts, but coordinate efforts to bring everyone together effectively under kind of one umbrella. And what we're doing today is we're announcing our sort of partner prospectus for EV UK, and the whole fundamental theme that we're following is driving demand. How can we work together as an industry to drive demand? And I think for me, we get really distracted by some of the negative stories around EVs. It's very, very easy to see a car park story and then follow that story. I think we need to be super disciplined, and I think we need a simple mantra that we repeat over and over and over again as an industry, which is better, cheaper, battery electric. And so that's what we're doing there. And I really hope that as an industry, we've got all the skill sets and all the knowledge about these technologies. But I think we're a little bit, the government is supporting this, but as we've seen from recent announcements, the 2030 ZEV mandate is actually being slightly diluted. And I think we kind of need to think we're on our own as an industry. We need to get on with it, stop relying on other people.
And I want to bring Johnny in here, because Johnny, in your day job, Navuna Vehicle Solutions, you are dealing with a lot of the companies that are, we're trying to target from a business to business perspective. What is the view from there?
I think it is still too early to say, really. We are starting to listen to our customers, and I thought about this on the way in, actually. And I think inevitably what we're going to see is that some are going to adapt to that change, but others have made the statutory commitments, reports, shall I say, which are commitments, so they aren't going to change. But I also think it comes down to how influential that fleet is. So if the business is very much reliant on the fleet, they probably are going to adapt. Whereas if the fleet is a small proportion of the business, they probably won't change. So that's my viewpoint at the moment. But again, as I say, it is a little bit early, but we'll be listening very, very carefully over the next few weeks.
And Dan, just to come back to you, so the ZEV mandate from a fleet perspective, do you think it's missed something? Where do we think it's at?
I mean, I'm not as knowledgeable as you guys on this one, but I mean, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of talk about people, not enough private buyers at the moment. Fleet is carrying quite a big weight. It wouldn't take much for, some fleets to be slightly less keen or slightly less motivated for the numbers to fall quite significantly. I do think there's quite a lot of people, private buyers, who are actually just going via salary sacrifice because it's the best option on the table. So that's being masked. But I think, for me, it's economically, it's a no-brainer. The cost of driving electric report that the EV UK commissioned recently showed that you could save on average £5,850 per car over the lifetime of the car. Now you multiply over that multiple cars. I mean, that's a huge opportunity. You guys will know better than me, but it just seems like we are allowing some of the sort of slightly more negative voices to kind of dominate. And I've always been very pro battery electric vehicle. There's no secret about that. But I'm pragmatic. I think FEVs have got a role to play. I think that, if they've got a plug, that can help us. But I'm very disappointed to see plugless hybrids getting an abeyance from 2030 to 2035. I think that's a really bad message.
I had a question for you, Dan, on that. Does it matter? This dilution, as you used quite rightly, in terms of phraseology, in terms of diluting the ZEV mandate a touch, does it matter? Like when it comes to it in the next 5 years as technology advances, just yesterday I was driving a car that was comfortably doing 400 miles on a charge. Will hybrids naturally just be almost an irritation, I'm hoping, in the next 5 years as the technology moves so far? So people will start to recognize, well, actually, I'm just going to go electric anyway, because lugging another engine around is pointless.
I don't think it changes the end destination. But I think it does do a couple of things. So I think you're right. I think it's quite good actually to say, does it really matter? We're going to get this job done. The technology's better. So I just think there's a couple of little concerns. One of which is I think the average consumer, not people in this room who are very well educated on EVs, is quite confused about the different vehicles that are available. I think that's a real concern. A lot of people think, well, I'm probably not quite ready to go battery electric vehicle because I've heard this, I've heard that. And actually, there's very few use cases where I wouldn't point someone straight to battery electric vehicle now. So I think there's that part of it. I also worry for UK industry. I think, ironically, what the government is trying to do is trying to protect the car makers that are here. But this show would be half the show if there weren't any Chinese and Korean companies here, right? None of them manufacture here. They, to me, seem like the best bet right now. I think Nissan will be at our show in October. They've got new cars coming, etc. But that's what worries me, is that actually the car companies that here go, oh, we can take it a little bit slower. Meanwhile, the world turns and the Chinese get better and better. I saw a Zeekr product announced yesterday, 500-mile range. It's only going to get better, right? We know that, you know that, but I just think, I just worry that there's a lot of consumer confusion out there. And I think I want to have more car manufacturing, more industry here, more of those businesses. You know, I don't want to just be beating Germany on volume one year. I want to beat them heavily next year. I want the UK to be at the forefront. And that's my worry, that it will happen, but we won't be the leaders. And I think there was that opportunity to be the leaders.
Yeah. We do love being the leaders, and you know, it's been a long time since we won the World Cup, so you know, it's good to get one over on the Germans, right?
Any day now, it's coming. It's coming over.
I just want to bring John and Sarah in as well. I know that they're sitting there patiently. They can't actually see the crowd or see. Well, I think you can see us. Oh, there you go. A little view of the crowd. John, does this ring true to you? I mean, you're involved with Net Zero Scotland and Net Zero Club and things. You're doing a lot on this journey. Tell us just what are your thoughts on that?
I've always felt that nothing has changed. As far as these latest announcements are concerned, very little has changed. There's nothing which is making business go, oh dear, woe is me, that they weren't saying prior to these announcements. Business is getting things done. Government is sitting there playing with numbers and pulling different levers, but not actually supporting the industry. And we did a poll on Sunday looking at what were the main things that fleets needed to make the change happen to electric. 28% said they wanted better public charging. 40% said incentives and grants is the thing that they need. 22%, interestingly, said fleet training and information. And there was a few other bits and bobs, but training, incentives, and public charging that they can access. That's it. Those are the concerns for business. That's the concerns for fleets. And what the government does is neither here nor there to me.
Good. And does that ring true for you, Sarah?
Yeah, I really appreciated that poll. I think the other thing that would have been interesting to ask on there is, how are people voting with their wheels in terms of what warranties and assurances the manufacturers are offering these, particularly fleet operators, if you think their cycle might even be included twice within a 7 to 10 year warranty. I think that's a really important purchasing decision when thinking about procurement long term. I've heard many times people are just waiting for that last round of internal combustion engine purchase or lease before they go EV. So what the manufacturers can be doing now is assuring them that it's a no-brainer, there is no risk, and should anything go wrong, they'll be looked after.
It does feel like the onus of government has been on the manufacturer at the minute. But I think we've alluded to it through our conversation here, the consumer. And I think, yeah, we're about on time. So I'm going to introduce Richard Parker. Richard, come join us in between Dan and I, a rose between two thorns.
Big rose.
Big rose, big rose.
Said that. So, Richard, you deal with data. And I think that data helps people like me understand what my vehicles are doing. So in a fleet perspective, you give those fleets something. But I mean, in the context of the ZEV mandate, obviously fleets are being pushed by manufacturers at the moment because there's nothing on the demand side. But with manufacturers are saying you must take electric vehicles. How can you help in that process?
Let me just address something as well. It's not just the ZEV mandate that's pushing our customers, it's actually their customers. So if you're a supplier into a larger organization, to Johnny's point, those businesses are driving change because of the reporting that they need to be doing through to the FCA and things like that. So that's been quite a shift in our customer base, because we operate, you know, quite small customers in some SMEs and smaller corporates, and they are being dragged, whether they like it or not, into this space, which is great. So that's good. But to the data point, you know, we work very hard, and Sam will attest to it, because our data got him his 3 Guinness World Records and Sarah's one.
Richard, we should just say,
I didn't say anything.
we should just say that Richard is from Webfleet, and Webfleet are a telematics provider. So little boxes go in vehicles and give wonderful insight to help people make informed decisions. Like, Sam, should I go any further or not? Anyway, there we go.
Bring the jeopardy. But you're right, you've just mentioned that word as well. It's the insight, because we know that there's so much data out there. And if you're a business who's trying to get your head around this new space of transitioning, the last thing you need is a load of data that provides more confusion rather than clarity. So actually, a lot of what we are trying to do is to bring easier decisions to those decision makers with the assurity that there is no risk attached. You know, and that's the thing as well. We're in a time where actually uncertainty and risk is probably as high as it's been for a long, long time. So actually, how do we give a business decision maker the ability to say, I'm going to put it in that vehicle, I'm going to change that out, and I know it's going to work. And that's about the planning piece, getting that right. But it's also about the bit afterwards, which is the execution, and actually making sure that vehicle doesn't stop somewhere because the driver hasn't been educated about charging and everything else like that.
So, Richard, I'm gonna go to Dan for a second. Dan, in terms of the consumer, then, so we've heard from Richard there that yes, there's insight available to help people make decisions, but we've talked about the consumer and the importance of the consumer, because if the consumer isn't buying the new vehicle, they're buying the used vehicle, and the used vehicle helps the residual value of the new vehicle, which then helps the fleets adopt them. Is there enough in this ZEV mandate review to address the needs, and is there something that needs to happen pretty quickly there?
I mean, there's no secret that manufacturers are asking for more incentives. There has been some talk about doing a communications campaign. I think that's sorely needed, if I'm completely honest. I think that Go Ultra Low is a long time ago now, for those that can remember that campaign, and that was when EVs weren't quite as good as they are now. 10 years ago. I think we're absolutely ripe for a consumer communications piece. And I mean end users in general. I don't just mean, you know, people driving privately. I mean fleet drivers as well. That will all feed into that. So yeah, I think, and Electric Vehicles UK, we've said we're very much up for delivering that. Our fear that is if the existing automotive industry, let's take the SMMT, for example, who do a very, very difficult job, by the way, they represent all fuel types. They represent all manufacturers. They don't necessarily drive EVs, understand EVs. They haven't been sandboxing with messaging like we have for years with consumers and end users. If they do a consumer campaign, I don't think it will hit all the marks. So we've said, you know, Electric Vehicles UK, if government wants to do something like that, we will help them to do that. Ultimately, we'll try and do that on our own, but I've got to raise funding to do that. It would be great if government would put some money into their pocket, but is it really realistic that government are going to spend much money on incentives and consumer campaigns at the moment? I don't know. And just one final point, Paul, I think there's some incredibly well-educated people in this room who've been studying EVs, and actually you can see where they're looking. They're looking on things like YouTube and Google, far more than they're looking on manufacturer websites, far more than they're going to old school automotive magazines, etc. They might be on LinkedIn rather than Facebook. These people exist. They come to shows like this. They don't necessarily go to, I don't know, the British Motor Show. They come to shows like this because it's all there for them. Treating the consumer like one big monolithic block is the most inefficient mistake that the industry can make. There was, what, 69,000 EVs sold in March, a record number by volume. If we are bringing on 30,000, 50,000, 70,000 a month, that's in X amount over a year. How are we targeting that group? The people who are imminent, the people who consider us, or the people who the next 3 or 4 years? You could spend an awful lot of money trying to go and get the late mainstream. People who aren't interested at this point in time. So I think it is possible to do a consumer campaign now, which is much more focused, much more targeted. And I think people are generally not hostile to EVs. Yes, there's a few, but generally they're just a little bit hesitant. And that's the key bit. How do we help them over that hesitancy? Because as we all know, the products are great, right?
The products are really great. And you know, we've got new vans coming to market for the big fleet users, which Johnny deals with day in, day out. But I'm interested in this consumer bit, and I'm going to go to Sarah if I can. Sarah, in Sarah's day job, she deals with payment solutions at charge points of all places. And I think the consumer experience sometimes bounces against challenges. Sarah, how is the industry sort of kind of meeting that side of the need? Because we want to be able to go up, tap our card and get on with our day. how is what you're doing and what you're seeing in your day job affecting things?
I'm really pleased with the response, especially with the payment charter. That's been a huge collaborative effort across the industry. It's obviously being led by us at Paythrough, but we're now seeing the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, we're seeing OZEV, the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, we're seeing the REA, the Renewable Energy Association, and also EVA England really paying attention to this, because ultimately, without putting the user first, the driver first, the fleet manager first, if we can't make payments seamless, then we won't be seeing the profit margins that are all required by the charge point operators. And frankly, it's an old system being applied to new technology. So really, we need that feedback loop complete from just the private driver, but also the fleet drivers, and how they plan to manage those payments is paramount to this industry being a success, and the legacy equipment out there being replaced by more communicative hardware.
Sarah was absolutely exemplary there, almost.
Oops.
Didn't say the EVA acronyms. Acronym.
Oh no, Electric Vehicle Association England. You're so right. I do apologise, but I've done this on purpose. So we've got the EVA representing the private driver, the REA representing industry and government, and of course with OZEV and now the FCA included, we're seeing a real pack to the punch.
Good, Sam.
Sarah, can I just pull on that thread a little bit more? There was a post out this morning from our good friend Kate Tyrrell from ChargeSafe, talking about her challenges around pre-authorization and the fact that she failed to get her money back within the minutes or hours that you benefit from in the petrol world. There's often pitchforks at dawn sort of thing on the charge point operators that they're failing in pre-authorization, but a lot of this is to do with the way in which it's categorized relative to the categorization that is synonymous with wet fuels. I probably articulated that very poorly, but could you explain why that's a challenge and how that's probably one of the things which would help in the consumer world if we could get the same sort of fluidity, pun intended, that we do with the wet fuel industry?
Yeah, the payment charter is really there to set out some guiding principles. And I would say pre-authorization is the #1 complaint from absolutely every facet of this industry. And ultimately, the charge point operators do have a responsibility to play, because they are the ones who agree on the pre-authorization amount. Now, I'm calling for us to look at our average transaction values and cover it to that level. So this means risk. So we don't want the merchant, that's the CPO selling the energy, to be at risk of a fraudulent activity or a card that doesn't exist or an account that doesn't exist. So that's what a pre-auth does. It protects everyone in the ecosystem and makes sure the money goes where it should go when it's time. But there is a lot to be done, and it comes down to procurement. If you deploy a decent payment system within your charge point operator network, consumers and drivers will have that money returned much faster than we're seeing today. And this is where people like the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, will come in to make sure that CPOs are not only aware of this, but are doing it.
Right. John, you've got your hand up. You've been patiently waiting. Well
You
done.
have, so patient.
Do you know, I do have patience occasionally. I just wanted to reflect a comment from Bob Murphy, because here we all are stroking each other beautifully and saying, isn't the EV the most fabulous thing in the world? Here's the real world. Bob Murphy's been in this industry for the last 14 years and has run many, many electric vehicles and many fleets. And he says, big issue I'm hearing from a BEV van user is the amount of downtime required for charging a short range vehicle during the day. Having something fit for purpose and having the depot infrastructure to back it up is absolutely critical. And he's right, isn't he? EVs are great, but you need the charging infrastructure to go with them. And for that, Richard and people who provide the data and the insights are absolutely key in making sure that EV can be a success.
It's worth asking, Richard, is there anything that you can help with in that regard?
Yeah, obviously there's loads, but what I would say, John, to your point though, there's some of our most successful fleets in our business actually are back to home, and they're making it work, and it comes back to education. Yeah. Okay, they spend a lot of time investing in those drivers before they get the keys. And to Dan's point about the consumer, maybe transferring a B2B mentality over into a consumer about education and getting consistent with education, and they've made it a complete success. But the data is obviously there, you know, so at the beginning of the day, there's all sorts of notifications that you can provide that allows fleet managers to be assured that when that vehicle starts the day, it's got what it needs to complete it. And that's backed up with further data through the day that says, actually, is the plan for the day actually transacting as we expect it? Is my productivity going to be maintained? Because earliest notification of something not quite right leaves you the time to amend it during the day. And one of the things, the big breakthroughs we've had in our understanding over the last 12 months is actually that the driver can have about a 40% impact on the battery range on a day through their actions of knowledge of the vehicle and how that right foot treats the vehicle during the day. So that's where we're spending a lot of our effort actually in the coming months, is really delivering driver coaching at the point of the driver being in the vehicle to ensure that fleet managers get at the expected range on the day.
I think that's super important. Sam, go.
Yeah, I was going to say to Bob, he started the sentence with big issue. I don't think it's a big issue. I think it's a big education piece, because it's the concept of trying to charge your vehicle at a depot or out in the field is entirely predicated on your dwell time, your use case, your duty cycles, what kind of vehicle you've got, has it got AC charging or DC charging, what capability have you got at your depot, what power is available at your depot. There is a multitude of variables that spring to mind. I'm sure there's 20 or 30 more that dictate what you can and can't do. But with absolute certainty, every fleet in the country, a proportion of that could electrify today. I'm convinced, even if it's only 5 or 10%, and then build on that. So we've just got to, it is an issue, but it's one of learning, right? It's learning what capabilities, what variables you've got to play with, and then finding the right tech to fit those set of variables.
I would argue to say that it is a big issue, Sam.
Oh, shut up, Johnny.
I was going to, but I'll let you do it. Go.
No, I was just saying that in answer to your earlier question, Sam, about does it really matter? And I think it really does for those van fleets, not so much for the cars. And the reason I say that is there is a large proportion of fleets with vans that don't have the luxury of charging at home, even if they could charge at home, don't go into depots for a long enough dwell time, and therefore relying on a CPO network that's necessarily not fit for fleets. And then the downtime attributed to even half an hour where they're not fixing boilers or doing logistics or whatever. The wheels aren't turning, the vehicles aren't earning, and that's their source of revenue. So I would argue that what Bob said there, I'm so glad JC raised it, because I do think it is a big issue. And where this ZEV mandate conversation comes in is that's the fleets that's going to affect the most. Not the company cars, not the salary sacrifice, nothing like that's going to be touched on this.
Yeah,
but the vans.
And I think that's really important. We'll come to John. I've seen your hand. I think that's really important, that it is a big issue, because the manufacturers have got a gun against their head. Although, albeit it's a 2.2 now, it was a 45. Now it's a 2.2. Might not kill them, but they've got a gun against their head to put vehicles on the road. In terms of the vehicles, both cars and vans and truck, not so much trucks. So like the European legislation is kind of dealing with the truck side of things, but the vans certainly. And the operator has a big issue, because they can't move at the pace that necessarily the ZEV mandate wants them to without some help. And it might be as simple as an education program, and training and understanding and deployment. But this is consultancy. It needs time and effort. John.
I was going to agree with you, Paul. I think what's really key here is that you've got fleet operators who might take an electric van, find it challenging to get the knowledge they need in a short enough window that they can make the EV work for them. And that first experience of driving an EV, of operating it, is then a bad one. And if it's a bad one, they are not going to rush to buy any more EVs. So we've got a real job to do here of information and helping people to adopt the new technology. It's not new anymore, but it is to those people who are just trying it for the first time.
Dan, can I come to you on the used market? And we'll talk about cars, because the van market is sort of a bit, it needs help at the minute in terms of the used vehicle market. But does the used vehicle market and that world have a part to play in all of this front end, from your opinion?
I think it's normalization. It's the network effect we hope will kick in at some point, where so many people have got an EV, you won't think it's an issue. 7 out of 8 car purchases are used, so it's going to be the main access point for the majority of consumers. I had an old Nissan Leaf at one point, Mark 1. I probably wouldn't recommend that to anyone apart from a hobbyist. I loved it, but I wouldn't recommend it. But then I had a BMW i3, and that was fun. I think you might have had one of those as well. A fantastic car, which I would recommend to people, and you get a good one of those for £10,000. So I think the used market is a really good story we have. We probably didn't even have 12, 18 months ago. It's really starting to go great guns as supply comes through. So yeah, I think the used market is key. But I do, really would like to see the van market grow more quickly. And I guess when we talk about EV drivers and we say, you know, will you go back to ICE, and 9 out of 10 say, no, we won't. I guess the van market, if you get it wrong right at the outset, then it could really put them off, because the cost of getting it wrong is so much more impactful to a business than it is to a consumer who might have one bad experience and just write it off to a bit of short-term pain.
Let me give you some context on what getting it wrong looks like, or even getting it as good as you can get it. So it doesn't even need to be wrong per se, but it's half an hour a day, maybe 3 hours a week, maybe. Doesn't feel like a lot, but when you're talking productivity for a business whose vehicle is worth 750, £1,000 a day in revenue terms, we're talking upwards of £18,000 a year in productivity loss per vehicle. The two vehicles there, you've got Royal Mail and you've got Openreach, account for 80,000 vehicles. So 80,000 times, somebody's good at maths, you could do that. Manja, you come out quick, do the numbers. It's a lot of money. And that's British industry. That's the weight on British industry. But if we get it right, the cost of energy, maybe utilizing solar, maybe creating microgrids. These are all of the things that we need to kind of start thinking about, because the value of a vehicle sitting and us getting it wrong is absolutely huge. It's not necessarily seen, but you know, a payment authorization that doesn't work at a charge point costs 10 minutes, and you times that by 20 or 30 or, you know, that type of stuff is suddenly a critical issue. I'm loving all the love for vans, by the way. I'm just, Johnny, thank you, and Dan, thank you, and John. Yeah, we're getting a community of vans. We've even got a world record holder of vans. Anyway,
Someone's got to do it.
Absolutely.
By the way, Nissan Leaf Mark 1, if anyone's got one, I'm in the market for one. I don't want to drive it anywhere. I'm using it for vehicle to grid. So if anyone's got one of those they want to sell to me, I'm all ears.
And I love my Nissan Leaf, by the way. My Mark 1 took me from Eastbourne to Newcastle in 2014. So
well, it took you the whole of 2014 to get
it. It felt that way. Yeah, it felt that way. I'm still doing it. It's still going.
John, you are our usual question master. Are there some good questions in the chat? We will be coming to you all at some point as to whether, but I just want to see our online guests, because you know we've got a bunch of people watching online as well. So John, anything there from in the Q&A or in the chat that really should be called out?
Very much so. So regarding small manufacturers, Ian Thompson wants to know, has the clarification in the ZEV mandate where they are exempt from those targets, do you think that's right, that there are people with exemptions, or should we just be cracking on, and if you only make a small number of vehicles, that's your problem?
Coming to you, Dan.
I mean, I think it's such a, I can't get too excited about it either way, to be honest. It's such a small part of the mix. I mean, I think it would be good to have everyone doing it, but I can understand why they've made, I can understand some of the flexibilities. I'm not completely like, you know, the enemy of what's going on, but I can't get too excited one way or the other about that, to be honest. I think that to Sam's point earlier, this is going to move super fast. If we think of the progress we've seen over recent years, it's been pretty fast. When you're in it day to day, it seems glacially slow. But actually, if we look back at the last 5 years, it's been rapid. And I think a lot of those companies, those smaller ones, they fall into the same category as everyone else. Have you seen the Yang Wang U8? So you know what I mean?
Yes,
that kind of
cool
sports car.
Yeah.
You know, that is going to be unbelievable and cheap. And, you know, people who are wedded to combustion might find that their market shrinks quite quickly.
Yeah, and that thing can bounce. That is absolutely superb. Bounce at the lights. Anyway, there is another question, Paul, if I've got time.
Go, yes.
Okay, so I think probably let's go with Dan again. Michael Barton asks, my understanding of the ZEV mandate changes is that fines will be reduced and flexibilities will hit in 2029 rather than next year. Does this just mean that we're keeping all the brown stuff down the road and it will hit at some point?
Yeah, it is a kicking of the can. We work with a think tank called New Automotive that many of you are sort of familiar with. Their analysis was little immediate impact in the short term, greater uncertainty from 2026 to 2029, and a looming cliff edge in 2030. Higher emissions, more cost for drivers, and a blow to investor confidence. That was their kind of take on things. I mean, do we think that the automotive industry, the elements of it, the few elements of it that are lobbying against battery electric vehicles, will be content with this, or that we're going to get closer to that cliff edge in 2029 and there's still going to be some pushing against it? I guess it depends on how quickly this, I think the next 3 or 4 years are absolutely critical, by the way, to this whole thing. It could completely change. I think
we say that every year though, right?
Yeah, I've been saying that every year for 10 years now. But but I think I don't know, it feels to me like there are a few Chinese entrants here at this show. We know there's a lot more coming in Farnborough. We were in Sydney recently. There were a lot. It feels like they are really gearing up now. There's not so much toe being put in the water as, you know, big boots. Here we come. And I think that's going to force competition. So yeah, I think from a political standpoint, it is kicking the can, but I'm hopeful that the market itself will kind of sort itself out.
I think there is a feeling as well, right? I mean, we said it on the news the other day on the EV Café news, and I'm sure, Dan, with everything you're doing, it's the same, is that a couple of years ago, we were really fighting the media. It was a bashing at every, it was almost like the beginning of the year from January the 1st, 2022, I think it was, 3, I think it was, that we just got a deluge of negativity. That seems to have tempered a bit, is my gut feeling. Even when we're doing the news every month, it just feels like there's just more and more positive stories and less of the EV bashing. So I do hope, ever glass half full optimism, that sentiment is starting to flow through in a more positive fashion than we've seen in recent years.
I think that's right. And I just say one thing, thanks to all the heroes who fight against that misinformation, whether it's educating journalists, it's talking to politicians, spreading news online. I think there are thousands upon thousands of heroes in this industry fighting that fight. And I think now, if you're a journalist, you're probably aware if you run some rubbish, you're going to hear all about it. And that, I think, has had an effect, and long may that continue.
I'm just going to come to Richard on that very point, actually, because Richard, you're doing a lot of within your business, Webfleet, that getting people together, you're educating them, you're doing. So what is the mission that Webfleet are on?
Interestingly, there's been a divergence from our stakeholder map in our customer base from the fleet.
Big words, divergence in us.
Sorry, well,
I'll explain to you later, Paul. It's fine.
Thanks.
The coffee's kicked in and I'm caffeined up. So, in so much as a lot of decisions around fleet are actually being made by the ESG, environment, social, and governance teams, and we're finding that having set science-based targets and gone public in a lot of these organizations, it's almost, when we flipped into 2025, it was almost like, this is the second half of the decade, we've actually got to do something. And so we're finding there's a huge amount of work going on with these teams that are actually forcing fleets to reconsider exactly what their policies are with regard to transition and how to go about it. And that's doing stuff tomorrow by get people driving what they've got better, because actually if you get better fuel efficiency on what you've got, you will still get a carbon impact on that, as well as then planning and executing a transition.
Sarah, I'm going to come to you on this idea of ESG affecting the change, because the ZEV mandate is one thing that is affecting the change. There are other sort of zero emission targets, but the ESG kind of targets, the environment, social, and governance elements of big business moving forward. How do you think that's playing into this and aligns itself with the ZEV mandate?
Ultimately, with the ZEV mandate being a goal, yes, a legally binding goal, but nonetheless a goal where the posts do keep shifting. The constant here is that the drive for it is to lower carbon footprint globally. That's the one thing you can't escape from. Why I love companies who work strongly with ESG principles is the same rules apply. There is a set parameter that you have to meet. You have to prove it. You have to independently verify it. This is where greenwash fades. You can't hide. It's all in the data. It's all in the figures. And we are seeing that supply chain becoming increasingly noisy, demanding that companies within their procurement adhere to these strict rules. And I'm totally here for it. It's so important. It's, for me, one of the things I love about ESG is it's gone away from what used to be considered wishy-washy, and now it's on the lips of the finance director, of the CEO and the MD, because they know that's how you attract good workforces. They know that's how you grow an economy, by creating a sustainable and thriving environment.
Very well said. So we do have time for questions. So if you want to pop a hand up if you have a question in the room, but we also have questions, I think, still online. I'm looking at the Q&A. There seems to be stuff there. And Sarah, you and John, between you, maybe take a question each and just throw it out at us.
Well, I've got a question for Sarah, funnily enough. Paul Shearer Barnfather asks, why is pre-authorization necessary? Would it really hurt just to drop it to 0? You'll know the scale of the problem, Sarah. Hit us.
I'll hit you in a sentence and do not drop it to 0. As we were talking in the chat here, I know not everyone can see the chat, we're talking about the mass market coming forward. We're talking about the main body of the consumer coming forward. And we've been able to get away with very low pre-authorization amounts, but with consumerism goes fraud. And in a sentence, pre-authorization protects against fraud. It means that you have the account checked to make sure it's got money in it, and that money goes to where it should go, which is the person selling, the merchant selling the goods, in this case, the charge point operators. So nobody benefits from having a 0 pre-authorization, but everybody benefits from having what's called an automatic reverse, where you get your held amount back very instantly, and the price you pay should be what you expected to pay.
Absolutely right.
Yeah,
Should we keep going, Paul?
Yeah, I was just
Well,
going to.
got Sam on.
I was going to mention Sarah's made a couple of really good points there, particularly the latter one about the fact that it's returned as swiftly as possible. That's the key thing, really. But at GridServe, we had the pre-authorization down at £1 for a good couple of years, and that was okay. It meant that we were able to check that someone's account was there, but we sort of took the risk a little bit that they had the money to pay the charging session. That led itself to quite a lot of fraud as well, though, because as things have now grown, people are working out ways of trying to get round such a level of generosity. So pre-authorization does need to stay, because otherwise, we as a business get hit hard. So it's an absolute vital thing, but we just got to make it more fluid and more transparent and quicker to return people's pre-authorization fees. And then the problem will just disappear. Once we've solved that, we will never talk about it again, because it'll be like petrol or diesel in terms of transactions, and everything will be fine. We just got to get there.
Fine. Back to you, John, with a question. Unless there's questions locally. None
Go
here,
local.
Yeah,
None
cool.
there. Right. Okay. Let's go with
Fair
Robin Hughes, who's very much not local, from Hong Kong. And I don't understand this question fully, so forgive me, but I'm just going to read it as he wrote it. If the Nissan e-Power powertrain, which is Qashqai New Leaf Aria, and some other overseas models are fueled with 100% renewable fuel, does this overcome the concern over ICE content? I don't understand that question fully, Robin. Does anybody on the panel?
I'm not going to claim that I do, but I guess if it's burning stuff, then it sounds like it's going to create something coming out of the back. And the NOx and SOx particulates, which is one area that we really want to get down, is they're going to still be produced, is what I would unscientifically say.
I can imagine that the gentleman on my left will just say #stop burning stuff and be done with it. Is that right?
Well, I think e-Power is their name of Nissan's engine, isn't it? It's the kind of So I mean, yeah, I'm stop burning stuff still mainly. I mean, I think the reality is, it's great, isn't it? You can use renewable fuel, but you've got to get it from somewhere. That's not a zero-sum game. That's a really complicated, expensive thing. Actually, if you get electricity right, it can be really, really cheap. And that's where we should be focusing our efforts on making electricity cheaper in the UK, probably.
Keep it simple, stupid. We've got a question here.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned earlier that government have a massive role to play in this, and that the uncertainty of the governmental direction is playing a massive role into it. My question is, how do we get them more certain? Because in this country specifically, I think there's a lot of chasing our tails. The government will put something in place when they realize something's going wrong. They wait for there to be a problem before actually saying this is the solution. Whereas across the pond, I hate to say it, in America, they're sort of putting the base. So I'm saying if we raise the baseline, companies will rise to meet it. How do we get, I know it's a tricky one, but how do we get the government on board and stop them chasing their tails? Stop saying 30 to 35, then back to 30, then to 29, and probably to 40 at some point.
We seem to have gone a bit anti-expert in the UK. I don't quite know when that began, but I would love any of the gentlemen here, or Sarah, anyone who knows this space, to be the ones that the government are talking to. I just don't think in the UK they're talking to people at the front edge of the kind of the EV market. I noticed with interest that the Secretary of State for Business went to Tokyo recently to talk with Japanese OEMs. And I might have screamed into a paper bag and said, well, why aren't you, and buried it, why aren't you going to China? I mean, that's really, or Korea, that's where really the market is. So I have to say, I think that the top level of government, because I actually think the DFT are great, actually, they're super engaged, they really understand this area. The top level of government in that House of Cards cabinet style thing, I think there's other stuff going on. I think often, you know, they're trying to almost like triangulate their position against other parties. And there's quite a strong net zero vibe coming from one of the other parties, a couple of the other parties at the moment. And I think Labour is trying to fathom how it kind of heads that off at the pass, because I think the next general election, whenever it comes in 2028, 29, will be a net zero or not zero election. Sadly, I think that's where we're headed. So I think from my perspective, there are lots of EV experts in this room alone, and those should be the ones the government should really be talking to.
And it is very difficult to get audiences with government. We about a year ago, just over, we collaborated with the BVRLA, Logistics UK, the Renewable Energy Association, and the Association of Fleet Professionals to present a plan on vans to government. And it's a long, hard job to get through to the right people. Unfortunately, then the government, well, I say unfortunately, I don't care whether I'm a none of the above kind of person. But it changed, it caused delays, but the DFT, to your point, some very, very educated people in there, and they've kind of, I think, are starting to really inform government quite well. And I would say, I would call out Lillian Greenwood appears to be listening and appears to be saying the right things. And also in a debate about the zero emission van plan, we saw cross-party collaboration where the outgoing government commended the incoming government for taking it on. So I think there's green shoots of hope, possibly.
We did a Westminster event recently where we met with, I don't know, maybe a dozen MPs. We're trying to engage with as many as possible, but it's how could you make decisions, the right decisions, if you've never even driven one? I'm not saying all MPs should own one, but if they've not driven one, they don't understand it. I mean, it's a huge difference between a combustion engine vehicle and an EV. So we're going to do a Westminster ride and drive soon to hopefully get as many of them into EVs. We must have a van for that day. We must have a van. It must have Sam going really slowly somewhere as well. But we, you know, to get as many of them in, I mean, that's key, because I think, you know, we have the same issue, top level of politics, we have a top level of journalism, a lot of generalists. And actually, you know, I would rather Sam was, you know, Secretary of State for Transport or whatever, or the Johnny was running that. No, genuinely, I mean that. You know, so I mean, the only EV driving MP I knew was Grant Shapps. I'm not sure what name he's going by today, but that was his name at the time. But you know, so that it's very, very rare, and you have to start from absolute zero knowledge. I think Lillian Greenwood's really trying to get to grips with it, to be fair.
For sure. Any more questions? Yeah, I've got a question from Andy Eastlake.
Just one quick last thing on that while we're getting the mic over as well is, I do wonder, yeah, I was about to mention Westminster as well. We've had the privilege, GridServe, of being within those walls on occasion to discuss various things, and there is always quite a significant oil-based influence. Those guys are still there. They are very, very, very clever. They know what they're doing, and they know how to influence government. And they're really, really very good at it. to their credit, but it sometimes hampers us because their influence is much, much louder and harder than we can shout.
And Eastlake.
The money.
Absolutely agree, Sam. A question for the panel, and if you like to focus back on the EV, the ZEV mandate, isn't there an argument to say that we really haven't moved forward and we've actually just kicked the can down the road, even perhaps a little bit further? I mean, if we look back, the ZEV targets haven't changed, so we're still at the 70% for vans in 2030 and the 80%, but we've now got more flexibility. We've still got no definition of what we're allowed to sell beyond 2030 in cars. We know it can be hybrid, but that's not defined. Plug-in hybrid, we know it can be ZEV. It can't be pure combustion, but we don't know what that means. All of the small volume manufacturers have been given a stay of execution until 2035 with a massive cliff edge because they will have to be zero then. So isn't there an argument, and it's, as I say, it's an open question, that actually we haven't really moved forward at all from Rishi's rollback in whenever it was, 2019?
My initial thought of the output that came was it was interesting, the response of the manufacturers. So we had Lisa Brankin come out and say, it's enough. And for me, for the manufacturers, it needs to be like, it still needs to be a little bit thumbscrew. There needs to be a little bit of pressure. And so I wanted them to be slightly unhappy with it. And it seems that they were slightly unhappy with it. They've recorded in that statement 2.3 billion that has been put aside for incentives, it seems, or tax benefits and breaks and things like that. For me, it's the articulation of that as to whether this is a successful ZEV mandate or not, because the backing up of the used car market, the charging infrastructure, the cost of putting in the ability to deliver energy wherever you need it, that is the critical thing for me. I'm really pleased that they kept the numbers in. I think if we'd have seen the numbers move even 1%, I think I would have just kind of got really upset. But they've kept the numbers. So 70% by 2030 for vans, 80% in cars. And as I say, I think the European legislation is looking after the truck side of things, but we need to put more demand side, I think, and it's only then will we know whether or not the ZEV mandate has actually brought anything forward. But I think it's got the manufacturers still on side, and that's where I want them. I don't want them like, oh, it's okay now. I want them to still feel pressure. So that's my view of it. Any other?
I think the overall worry for me is, as John I think said earlier, that businesses get what's going on. They're pretty in tune. It's commercial fleets. But it's the sentiment that worries me. It's the consumer sentiment that these rhetoric, the little nuances have changed since Rishi all the way through to today, just gives that consumer sentiment that, oh, I'll just give it a bit longer.
I mean, Andy's extremely knowledgeable in this area. I mean, I think it is a bit of a step back. I think the 2 steps forward might be just the progress of the electric car market in general, how much better they're getting, how much cheaper they're getting. So I think that one might counterweight it, but I think it is something of a step back. And Sam reflected earlier on the fact that we've had a little bit less negative headlines of late. Well, that's been partly due to the thousands of heroes who've been shouting down those headlines, but it's also partly due to the fact that the monthly numbers have been pretty good for 9 months straight. Let's say they do now flatten off again and they're regularly at sort of 18, 19%. I could think you see those negative voices creep back into the media. That sentiment piece does worry me.
Yeah, I think that we'll see over the next few months. The van market has been actually going quite well for the beginning of the year. I'm hopeful that will continue, and I'm hopeful that the cars will do okay too. So John, Sarah,
would you just like to see a world just full of vans, Paul? Just to be clear.
All vans, but the thing that I drive on the daily basis. So my car can be a car, but nobody else's. Anyway, so John, Sarah, final thoughts from you, because we're going to be wrapping this up now, unless there's any burning questions. Oh, there is one burning question, but John, wrap up. Yeah, go for it. Just wait for a second. John.
Yeah, brilliant debate. Would love to do more of this. And I think what I would love to come out of this is that Team UK needs to be represented here. And that whilst we do champion electric vehicles, we also need to back our own industry, our own people, our own skills, and grow the economy for this country.
Fantastic. Well done, John. Sarah?
Thank you. Just to really reiterate, thank you for all being here face to face and also online. The EV Cafe is designed as a community to get your voices heard. And we've had the word bums on seats lots of times in the chat today. And it's got us thinking that if only a company as brilliant as Europcar, who already offer a 15% discount on hiring, could work with dealerships that then symbiotically, once they buy that car after they've used it and really lived with it for 2 weeks, why not give a consumer kickback there? Government mandates only get us so far. Experience gets us the whole way.
And that is exactly what Everything Electric is doing in spades, actually. We're both ends of the hall. We've got a massive ride and drive experience, which is fantastic. I think that's one of the critical things that Everything Electric has always been brilliant at, bringing the opportunity to get bums on seats. One final question that was just there. Go for it.
Yeah, it was more, I suppose, you talked about education, you talked about having to guide the drivers.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, the principle is the expectation is to do something different, not only from a vehicle perspective, but from an infrastructure. So tanks, filling up, etc., is a very fundamentally different perspective.
Yeah.
And it's education around the whole sort of landscape. The infrastructure has to come. It's not as simple as replacing your tank, filling up with fuel. The whole, you talked microgrids and what it might take and how good it might look. But ultimately, all of that has to happen as one to facilitate that transformation. So it's
I think
more deeply seated than just educating a driver.
Agreed. And I think, all of us here are under no illusion what Johnny's doing in his business, Sam's doing in his business, Dan, even with its Electric Vehicles UK, but I think a very, very embedded understanding of the need for infrastructure. And similarly, Richard from Webfleet in what they and the guys up there, I think we really do understand that. I think charging is not as visible. You know it if you know what you're looking for, and you're talking to the companies like that we've got here and that are around here, and the fleets that are going for it. But there's a lot of really good work going on in the space. It's not as visible, but there is some really good stuff. But anyway, yellow van syndrome, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying, I mean, I'm a more recent EV convert than these guys. I've only had mine a couple of years, but actually, when you do have to charge, you start seeing charges where you didn't know they existed before. And I think if you're not in an EV, then you don't see them, and we call it yellow van syndrome, where once you've seen one yellow van, you see a load of yellow vans.
And there's a yellow van just over there. So that's us. We're wrapping up. We're over time. So the commercial vehicle zone is there. Yeah, I get to plug it because I've got the mic. Go and see the vans, but go and see everything. And get your bum on a seat. Go and test something, enjoy something, and also just share the word that we need to work together to help the government deliver this, even though the government don't necessarily want to deliver it themselves. But anyway, we need to take it. We need to grasp it, and we need to go for it. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.